Greenville County schools had a little bit different problem from what you have in Baltimore, but it was kind of the same problem in that they needed more facilities. In Greenville County was a rapidly growing county, and they had a number of portables that were being used for for classrooms. The total number of portables at Greenville County schools, if treated as separate classroom schools, would have been about the 7th largest school district in the state. So there was a pretty huge deficit in buildings for kids to actually go to school in. So that was the big problem that they had. We started working with them around 1991, 1992. And the problem we faced in 1993 was they had an estimate of about $336 million that needed to be built if they were going to catch up with where they needed to be for schools. We worked really hard and diligently to change the way they were doing their funding, and by 1997 we had put a dent in it so that by then we only needed $554 million instead of $336. So we redoubled our efforts, and by 1999 we had gotten it down to $712 million instead of $336 million. There's a fellow, sometimes I like to quote a fellow named Will Rogers, who was a kind of a cowboy humorist. One of the quotes from him is, "If you find yourself in a hole, the first thing to do is stop digging." So somewhere around the end of 1999, we realized that we were in a hole and we needed to figure out a way to stop digging because we weren't gaining on the needs for the school district itself. In 1999, 2000, we started looking at doing something radically different. The backdrop is, in order to do what we had been doing, we had committed to a stream of revenues over a long term to get the schools built. Forget the nature of the revenues and all the rest of the details, just we had a number that we could work with. The problem is we were using it to build 1 or 2 schools a year instead of tackling the entire problem of the school district. And by the time we got 1 or 2 schools built, they needed another 1 or 2 schools. And by the way, the older schools were getting further and further dilapidated, so we needed more money for them. So we just couldn't get out of the hole that we were getting into. So we decided that we'd take a look at the stream of revenues and figured that, well, if we're making these payments every year, instead of doing it on what amounted to a modified pay-as-you-go version, why don't we convert that stream of revenues into payments on debt that would allow us to raise a lot of money? And I think you can go to the next slide. The number that we could raise at that point was somewhere around 1.1 or $1.2 billion.